to coming up to New Year 2018, and there was Brian Aldridge, as you can see him here, in his hunting gear, and he was just waiting. To be crowned Borsetshire Businessman of the Year. But then, of course, Kirsty Miller went swimming in the Anne and found herself surrounded by dead fish. And this led on to what I consider a nice little parlour game. Where shall we put Brian Aldridge? Is he the Borsetshire Businessman of the Year, or is he a Feckless farmer? Okay. Now, where else? What other farmers could we play this game with? Well, this is a picture of Ambridge, and the first farm in Ambridge was, of course, Brookfield. And here's David Archer, who is the third generation of archers. We've had Dan, then we had Phil, now we've got David, and there's Pip coming up. And they all are quite involved with their land, their traditional farmer. They have a mixed farm, which is pretty unusual. So they have some acres of arable, and they've also got cows and beef cows, and they've had sheep. Do they still have sheep? Yes. They used to have pigs, but they don't have pigs. Jill's got her bees and her hens. So it's quite a mixed farm. But it was to show originally how farming, and show farmers how they could improve. And then we got Brian Aldridge came along. And I can remember Brian coming along. And one of the earliest stories I remember of Brian Aldridge is him pulling out hedgerows, which I think Sheila was quite cross about, to have big open fields. He's got much lighter soil, as I will mention later. So he could farm, he mainly farms arable, although he does have lots of diversity in other areas. But he could farm much more like the farms of East Anglia, where they're huge farms, no hedgerows, you can just shove your tractors through. And then there was also Tony Archer, who started off as a tenant farmer, and then to make more money, he's here on his nice tractor because he likes his tractor. To make more money, him and Pat, partly for ethical reasons, but also a lot just to make money out of their farm, went organic. And they went through the trials of them going organic. But it was a contrast to both Brian, who's a big businessman, farmer, and the traditional Brookfield farm. And then we also got Joe Grundy. Joe Grundy was brought in, who had always been there, but suddenly appeared. And he suffered from a number of things. He had a relatively small farm. He was a tenant farmer, like Tony used to be. And he had two basically pretty feckless sons. Alf, who ended up in criminal, and Eddie was never really very interested in farming. And I would still argue Eddie is not interested in farming at all. He does agricultural jobs, but he's not a farmer. Ed, on the other hand, could argue is a farmer. But out of all of these farms, which one has the SSI on? It's Grange Farm. What is a farmer? I looked up some definitions. A farmer is a person who runs and works on a farm. Some farmers raise a variety of food crops, while others keep dairy cows and sell their milk. Or, the simplest, someone who owns or takes care of a farm. So there's something about the farm is essential to finding out what a farmer is. And here's a nice picture of a farm. This is very like David's toy farm, I think. But some of these things can go away. You could lose the pigs, like they did at Brookfield. You obviously sell sheep, or you can get rid of the sheep altogether. Even Jill could lose her hens, as she did, and consider giving up. And the cows could go away, as they keep coming and going on Bridge Farm. And then finally, if Josh Archer's around, your tractor's around. So if you're buying a farm, what would you be buying? You'd be buying the land and maybe a few buildings. What is land? I quite like the French term, right in the top corner, terroir, which if you go around a vineyard or a museum in France, you quite often come across, oh, the terroir, etc. That's just it's not just about acreage and how much land you've got. It's about all the other things about land that affect how you can use it and what it does to your wine or to your crops. So there's climate. The whole of Ambridge will have a pretty similar climate. But they've all got quite different topography. Some of them will be uphill bits. It's not all flat. Some are uphill bits, some are downhill bits. Some are dips and hollows. That will all change. There's the geology, which I will come on to a bit more about the geology. So the geology could vary across, and actually it must do on Lakey Hill, which I haven't quite worked out what the geology of Lakey Hill is.
Very, very fertile.
Yeah, yeah, but that's just humans. Then there's the way you manage the land. Whether you're organic, Pat and Tony have improved their land a lot by going organic and by taking much more care. And after the flood, it seemed that Brian had damaged his land because more of his land got washed away by the flood than any of the other farmers. There's microclimate. If you've got uphill and downhill bits and hollows, there will be some areas, even in the same field, you get some areas that are wet and cloggy, whereas other bits are dry. You can get frost hollows where you can have more problems with frost. And there's the soil. Now, what do we know about the Land of Ambridge? I went to my two trusty apps. iGeology, which you can have on your phone for free, and my soil app. And funnily enough, Borsetshire is not on either. So I went back. If Borsetshire is somewhere between Worcestershire, and this is Worcestershire and Herefordshire, and Warwickshire, its geology should be similar. So having looked at this, it's mainly Triassic with some Jurassic. And when I went on to look at the soils, they're totally different colours for the two different things, for the two different counties. But what you see is there's a lot of clay. The clay can become waterlogged in some areas. There is some sand at times. So that's probably what it's like. Now, if you're looking at soil, there are a number of different things you can look at. If you're looking at the soil in your back garden, I'll leave texture because I'll talk about that in a minute. Colour. The colour of your soil, we would all say is probably grey or brown, but actually it varies a lot. When I was doing proper soil science, like in this picture, you can see there's a thin black layer at the top, and then it changes colour as you go down the soil profile. We actually used to take out a book with different colours in, and you would write down the number of the colour of your soil. Because if you're in Devon, you get quite red soils. It could be grey. The ideal soil would be a nice, rich brown colour, probably. It could be black, like peat. And then the structure. The structure's, whether it's sticks together, when you dig in the soil, do you end up with a big, heavy clod, brick-like thing? Or do you get, it just crumbles to dust, which is what you don't want? Or even the structure that I've also had experience of, where you're digging in a forest and you actually need a pickaxe to get through the soil because you've got a heavy layer of virtually concrete. Organic matter, that's all the dead leaves and manure and stuff that you have that creates your nice fertile layer at the top. This is quite a thin fertile layer at the top. Pat and Tony hopefully have quite nice organic matter, but that will improve the structure of your soil, help it to clog together. What you don't want, if the soil's too falling apartish, then all the nutrients will leach through when it rains very heavily. Also, it could just wash away, as happened with Home Farm in the flood. But you don't want it so stuck together that the roots can't get through. And then finally, the microbes. And the microbes are actually the ones doing all the work. Because if we were on Mars and we took some sterilised leaves onto Mars and just shoved them on the surface, maybe even dug them in, you would not end up with soil, because it's the microbes that do all the work. They break down the leaves and other organic matter and get it into the soil. And then finally, mustn't forget the creatures, such as earthworms. Earthworms are wonderful creatures. Apparently Darwin studied them for ages. But they eat the soil and pass it through, and they create this beautiful, lovely soil at the end. Now, texture. Here I have not drugs. As was suspected when I left it accidentally on the counter when I arrived. I have some soil from my back garden that actually I didn't bother. I had never bothered to texture my own soil. But you get a bit of soil from your back garden and a little bit of water. And I do have wet wipes. Oops, that was too much water. Okay, so you get a bit of soil and some water. Now, when you've got it really wet, you can just rub a bit between two fingers and you can feel, there's sand grains in there. And I can feel the sand that's from my soil there. If you can't quite feel sand, but it feels kind of soapy, that's called silt. And that's you feeling silt. The bit of the soil that you can't feel like that is clay, which is the finest particles. But to test whether you've got clay is, can you make it into a ball? Which this is a bit wet. But I can just about make it into a ball. And if my plonk test, which is not official science, it kind of stays together as a ball. So that means there is some clay in there. The next one is, can you rub it into a sausage shape, like with plasticine? Which this starts but doesn't really make a good sausage. If you can make a good sausage, go on to, can you make it into a ring? Now, the more of those things that you can do, the more clay you've got in your soil. And this is a problem, because the clay is great, it will hold on to water in your soil, so you want some, but you don't want too much, because then you get waterlogged soils and it doesn't drain very well, and your plants, just like when I overwater my houseplants, they're likely to get root rot. So, my soil actually is pretty close to the perfect, because I can feel the sand in there, and it's quite a nice brownish colour. It did come from my flower beds that should be the best soil in my garden, and it's also got a bit of clay, so it's going to hold on to some water. So that's what Adam is doing when he goes on his field walks and tests the soil. Now this comes back to Brian Aldridge. Is he a feckless farmer, or is he a brilliant businessman? Well, the problem is, I actually think this is the wrong title. Because to be a really good farmer, you've got to have a really strong connection with your land. Brian Aldridge actually does okay with the businessy bit. He's diversified, he's got lots of different ideas, he knows about his money flow, etc. But as a farmer, does he actually have any connection? I mean, he sold his family farm in Hertfordshire to move to Ambridge. But then He just bought some land and he doesn't really have a connection. Even Jenny, I was thinking about this morning, has more of a connection to the land than Brian does. She was talking about how could you poison it, etc. So I actually think this is the wrong title. It should be Fantastic Farmer. And in that case, Brian Aldridge is definitely over here. And actually, I think, if you turn it round, Joe Grundy is a pretty good farmer. He's been let down by his sons and by economics and all the rest of it. And you can put all the others somewhere in between. I mean, Tom Archer is definitely a businessman, not a farmer. Johnny is definitely a fantastic farmer. The Brookfield lot are somewhere in the middle. They've got some ideas, but they do remember that they're actually farmers and it's about the land. And then I found a quote of, what is a fantastic farmer? No two farms are the same. Their uniqueness are a function of their particular soil, slopes, aspects, drainage, attitudes and microclimates. This means that farmers, unlike factory managers, have to be sensitive to and manage within the tolerances of a very specific place. So therefore, let's be fantastic farmers.
I think you deserve a reward there for the most Radio 4 programmes ever. Bonus question time, Wednesday, the money box in there as well as the Archers, of course. Any questions for Christine?
Thank you. I want to take exception to your idea that Joe Grundy is a fantastic farmer. No, boo. I love Joe as much as anyone. However, given Joe's, propensity towards scams, he was seriously telling me that if he was offered a big bone to throw some poison in the cans in his farm, he would have said no. All those years ago. Because that's got to be the acid test, presumably.
Acid being
All puns intended.
I'm not sure. I mean, yes, Joe was in the first scans, including spring water on Crouch Farm. I don't know whether he would, though.
No.
Would he take the money?
Right, okay, so, wait. The question is, would Joe Grundy take the money, hands up?
Those years ago, when he was all as it was, all those years ago. Come on, be honest now. I think the eyes have it. The eyes have it. Hold on.
310 each side. Livia.
I was just going to ask where you think Adam is on that side, because I felt that he's much more...
I think he's pretty good. He just cares about the soil. He's got a deep connection to the area. And he's actually gone out and studied agriculture. He worked in Africa. He cares a lot about soil and agriculture. I think he's pretty good. He's also got a bit of a business head, which is Brian always puts him down and says, oh, you're just pipe dream. But actually he's shown that it's getting out of strawberries, it's getting into something else because it's not making enough money. So he's
too busy not wanting to have a baby.
Does anybody else remember Joe Grundy dipping his sheep with a watering can because it was so much easier? This is a man who will come to any scam and then he says, I'll die at Grange Farm.
Listen, the Grundys, remember, the Archers should be called the Grundys and their oppressors. We're on the side of the underdog.
Well, academically, you can't be swayed, can you? Other than with facts.
We're swayable. Another one here.
I very much enjoyed that. Would you be able to draw some commonalities with politicians?
yes.
I don't want you to.
Yes,
I think it's-
because there are politicians who actually care about the constituents. There actually are ones. You may not live in that area. I grew up in an area where definitely our politicians didn't really care that much. But there are other politicians who are in it for what they can get. I mean, whether a certain ex-Prime Minister was actually disappointed to increase his majority when he won rather than be voted out of office so he could take some nice consultancies, I could not mention, but I would not be surprised.
Hi. I was just wondering, you said that you thought Tom was more of a businessman than a farmer.
Yes.
Is he really a businessman?
No, it's pretty useless of both, but...
He's a twat.